I am Erin Young, and you're listening to the Designing for Dignity podcast. The purpose of this podcast is to discuss innovation in brain change, age tech, and care. And we spotlight innovators and people with lived experience in the space with the goal of helping us shape better experiences for those navigating these spaces. And I'm really excited about today's conversation. Today, I'm going to be talking with Holly Larson. Holly is the creator of Family Care Horizons, which is a care planning and decision architecture for family caregivers that helps people move from crisis-driven care to something you can actually sustain. She's also a B2B tech content writer with over 2 decades of experience, and she came to this work through her own family.
Really pleased to be here. Thank you so much. I'm excited for our conversation.
So you've spent a long time writing about technology for some of the biggest companies in the world. And I'm curious, how did someone with that background end up focused on family caregiving systems?
I fell into care the way many people do, which is like through a personal experience. And our experience was that my sister and I had always expect to do caregiving. And when my mom passed, my dad had early stage dementia. He was still living independently. I planned a trip overseas to Italy, which was supposed to be the trip of a lifetime, and quickly turned into a disaster for us when he was injured. And when we returned, we were entering care together at warp speed. You're really managing a care system, whether you call it that or not. And as part of that process, you're integrating domains, making fast-paced decisions, and trying to create structures that hold. And that experience really kind of brought me into the work.
That's so relatable. I think so many are catapulted into caregiving in a moment of crisis and come into it expecting it to mean one thing and find out it's actually something very different that requires a different set of skills and a lot of foresight that maybe folks wish they'd had as they reflect back on that. What did that experience reveal to you that you weren't expecting?
Well, Erin, when we came back, I remember saying to my boyfriend on the plane, when we get back to the US, the system is going to take over, because the week before had been pretty horrific and just very traumatic for us. And when we came back, I realized that really wasn't the case. He had complications from the emergency surgery there, which forced new surgeries and new procedures. And for 2 years, my sister and I frantically tried to stabilize him. And that involved kind of, navigating acute care, planning for care after hospitalizations. Care can seem stable in a moment and then just rapidly spin into, as you said, a crisis. So I think I had assumed that, before the accident, that we would create a plan for my dad and that it would hold for quite a long time and be very stable.
And it turned out to be lots of fast corners and sort of being whipped around the bend. That's relatable. My dad also suffers from dementia, and we went through the same experience where we had a long time to prepare for the inevitability of his decline, but he had a seizure one morning and everything was different from that point forward. And it's a traumatic experience, both to the person who's living with and needing the support, but also to those that are providing the care. Are you still caring for your dad?
Yes, my sister and I are. He's in assisted living. He's been there since 2022, and he's in hospice and nearing end of life.
We have a lot in common. My dad is in the same situation. I'm so sorry that you're had to go through all of that, but I love that you're parlaying the experience that you've had to help other people. I'm curious, what do you think most people don't understand about what care actually looks like from the inside?
I think, like me, they expect that there's going to be more support. I think that they think that there's going to be somebody helping them with the integration work. And what you realize is that doesn't exist. You are the care system, and you are the one who navigates, finds resources, coordinates them, and integrates everything. And that's pretty complex work for families to take on. In our case, my dad had over $1 million of care, obviously due to his many hospitalizations and medical rehabs. And then there were significant other costs as well. And over the past 9 years, we've touched almost every aspect of care, from crisis-based care to assisted living and during the pandemic, home care. So it really reveals that people make, high pressure, high stakes decisions, and they may hold for a while, or they may be kind of superseded and need to change in a moment's notice.
Absolutely. And I feel like we've encountered exactly this recently in my dad's transition to hospice, where we assumed there was more coordination between his residential care and the hospice nurse. But in fact, we are a key communicator in the middle of all that. And I often think about what the flow of communication would be like if we weren't there, sticking it all together the way that we are.
That's really interesting. I mean, I just recently did another conversation, and I'm writing some materials on clinical transitions because I believe they're a huge risk surface, right? And it's exactly to your point. Like people assume, okay, my loved one has been in a hospital. They've had a lot of care. Their data is in EHR. Everything is going to be seamless, So we'll transition them to medical rehab or back to the home, and everything will flow and follow. And that's not always the case. Families usually have to do integration work for that.
Yeah, most certainly. Um, wow. Well, you've said that almost nothing has been designed for the decisions that families rely on when care gets complex like that. And I'd like to touch on that a little bit. What does that gap look like? And what are families doing in that gap?
Families often don't plan care, and they step into it on a moment's notice. And that could be a crisis like what we've experienced with our own families, Erin, or it could be something that's more of a gradual decline, and it's not always healthcare. It could be a financial issue.
Yeah.
Where adult children kind of step in to stabilize the situation. But the problem is you're making reactive decisions about really important issues that involve a lot of people, your entire family that's involved, and you don't have any kind of structure for making those decisions. So I believe there's an opportunity for families to work together, hopefully proactively and hopefully not in a crisis, design their decision architecture about what they will and won't do and how care will evolve over time with changing needs and with changing family capacity constraints and other issues.
I think that's really compelling. I am a part of a family that carries a rare genetic mutation that causes familial Alzheimer's disease, and my dad's Alzheimer's disease was caused by that genetic mutation. So I spend a lot of time talking to other people in this community about the ways that we can prepare and make things easier for our loved ones if we are a mutation carrier. One example that we encountered is the morning that my dad was taken by ambulance to the hospital. Everything that happened at that moment from that transfer for the next week or so added to our problems rather than help them. And in hindsight, I wish we had more than just a DNR. I wish that we had actually had a conversation about, if I'm at this particular point, this is what I would like to happen. But your framework goes beyond personal health preferences. I'd like to talk a little bit about the distinct tasks that you have identified and what you call
Yes.
the care load. So talk to me a little bit about the care load.
Well, I honestly started as out of personal interest because I just believe the care load is really is heavy, and I was sort of curious to map it. I was like, how large is this care load? And so I identified over 369 tasks, and I kind of mapped them across different domains. And I think what that reveals is you're not helping out. You're not doing a task. You're entering into a system that's got a lot of complexity to it. And those tasks, they're not all concentrated at once. So I talk about care horizons where care flows over changes. And I believe that who holds the care is one of the most important variables, not just the location of the care or the type of care. But yeah, if you are carrying the care load by yourself, that's a lot of complexity and it's quite a lot of work. So that kind of insight I would hope would help families kind of redesign who does what. For example, if you sign up for healthcare and clinical transitions, you're carrying more than a third of the care load. So you might want to think about that in your own
Mm-hmm.
family
Mm-hmm.
as you allocate responsibility. Some of them are not nearly as substantial as others.
Right. I think calling the things out and giving them a name is just really important.
Yeah, I agree with that. And in the care load, there's a formula for calculating the intensity of it, right? Because some tasks are emotional. Like if you're planning a parent's funeral, that has a lot of emotional intensity to it, and some are short, like you said, like with your colleague, and some actually take quite a lot of time. So you can use the care load to kind of map the intensity of that, and that can reveal some interesting insights as well.
I think that's really fascinating because we talk a lot in designing products in this space about the emotional weight of certain things. Sometimes it requires space and just recognition of the difficulty of the thing that we have before us. So you've actually put some metrics around that.
Yeah, there's simple metrics. I think the vision is to make them more robust over time. So right now it's kind of a self-diagnostic tool, right? And so the hope would be to bring visibility to the care load, and to help families kind of allocate roles and responsibilities and duties more fairly. I believe that a lot of times one person shoulders the care load, and that can happen for a variety of reasons. So if you can see things and you can understand their weight, and you can redesign them. And I think that's better for family stability and happiness.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I remember some of the times when my uncle, who lived further away, acknowledged the role that my mom played in caring for their parents as they aged. And I always thought that it was gracious, but also just always appropriate that he did that. And I know that not every family sees it as clearly as he was able to see it, the commitment and sacrifice that she was offering as the designated nearby caregiver. So these tools give families a way to see the things that they might not otherwise recognize.
And Erin, I think you hit on a really important point, which is that care is like invisible. Families who are in care understand it very well. If you talk to other caregivers, they can talk to you, about how they're experiencing care, where there's gaps, where there's opportunities, and how they're feeling the weight of everything, right? But then if you step back, we don't really have a way for analyzing and measuring care holistically in our country. And I think that's because we view care as a private family obligation. But you're seeing a lot of media articles about this, care creates a lot of operational strain, and that impacts a lot of systems. That could be, work strain where employees aren't able to do their best because they're carrying such a heavy load at home. It could be higher healthcare utilization due to mental or health or other problems. But care is showing up a lot of places, and it's not always understood well or measured well.
You're absolutely right. And this is only increasing as the aging population booms. I also think a lot about the impact that the care burden has on women in particular. With Alzheimer's, I think 60% or more cases of Alzheimer's affect women. So it's already disproportionately affecting women. And then on top of that, women tend to be expected to be the caregivers in our society as well. And these are some of the things that create the inequalities that we see because of the impact that caregiving responsibilities might have on one's ability to work and the unpaid care burden.
I think there was a report by Catalyst that said like 500,000 women had left the workforce due to care responsibilities last year. Now, I think that was both childcare and senior. We are seeing women step out of the workforce or shoulder more care responsibilities, and that can happen for different reasons, but it does create inequity. So it can negatively impact women's well-being at a simple level, and it can affect them financially in terms of their career. There's been lots of research to talk about basically the impact to retirement savings, to career progression, and the rest. I think that's important to manage. One thing I haven't seen, and I would love to see, is even when care is shared, among a family or among genders, who carries the cognitive load? Because I don't think that is properly analyzed. I believe that even when men contribute, women are still carrying the cognitive load. You see it with childcare and with family systems, how they integrate care, and it could be everything from planning childcare and organizing family get-togethers and the rest, and doing reminders. But that takes some time, and it also is a weight. And now if you compound that with elder care, you can have a fairly large responsibility. So if someone is helping out and doing tasks, but you're still carrying the cognitive load, it may feel very exhausting indeed.
Absolutely. Not to mention the fact that the way that the timing all works out is you probably have older teens at home, you've got the aging parents, and here comes menopause on top of everything.
It's
Great.
really too much, isn't it?
Yeah, that's really interesting. There's a very definite overlap between all of the care responsibilities that we take on as moms and the ones that we take on as daughters, and huge opportunities to serve women on both fronts. So I think it's interesting how you've mapped how care complexity evolves and what decisions emerge at each phase. So tell me a little bit about how the framework works in practice. Like, what does it do specifically for families, and why does understanding that evolution matter?
So the care framework works in different ways. For families, it provides them with a process and language to work through the process of discussing care, making care plans, and making decisions over time. So there's an operating system, and it starts with simple things like mission and vision. and do's and don'ts. That's what I call dignity guardrails, because every family is different. And some people will absolutely not consider things like facility care, whereas others might be more flexible. So you work through that process. And the goal is that everybody's voice is heard. There's no single person dominating, and that you get all those unspoken expectations on the table. And at the end of the operating system, you've created a charter. And you've analyzed what a care plan will be for your family. And that includes both what you wish and your capacity constraints and how you're going to evolve your decision making over time. And there's a companion guide to it, which is a care planning guide. I believe that care spans horizons. There's a lot of content out there about aging in place, which I think is a really noble goal. But when you anchor on that and you don't think about the long arc of care, then that can lead to reactive decisions. And suddenly you're catapulted to another, care state, or what I call a care horizon, and you haven't planned for it. So the planning guide looks at care across those horizons in a shared view of risk, which is caregiver and care recipient risk. And the goal is to help you shape care and to say, okay, we're in this horizon. This might be independent living, and where are we headed based on our knowledge of, our families, of our loved ones' health needs and what our family will do. And so you can make better decisions. Also creates options and resources that you may not have considered. The goal is just to sort of surface everything so you can make different decisions and move together as a family.
So how does it work? Does someone go to the website and sign up for
Yeah.
it? How do they?
There are 2 digital guides. You can download them and use them at your own pace. The idea probably is you don't do it all in one session, right? The idea is that you probably do the operating system and you gather your family together and you start having the conversations. And it might take, more than one session to craft a plan. And I think that's like absolutely okay. Then as far as like kind of shaping care over the long arc of time, that might be ongoing conversations as well. So you can create a plan and you can evolve it. I am evolving it over time. So what I'm adding visual language. So I have 3 different lenses for how we'll view care. And the goal is to help spark conversations around that. I've shared some of those pieces already online, whether it was the care adoption gap or different videos about the care load and the hidden architecture of care. I hope people will grab a hold of that as a way to talk about care, to visualize it and talk about it. When we visualize things, we can understand them better and we can spark interesting conversations and hopefully spark change as well. And then there will be a self-diagnostic piece that's coming, hopefully next quarter. I introduced a concept called care archetypes, and there's different roles that families play. And the idea is to show that family members usually play more than one role. No role is negative, so it's not a critical thing at all. Each role has strengths and sources of strain. And so the idea will be that you will enter the framework through those different roles. You'll do a quiz and get a report. And I think that will be very illuminating for families and organizations as well. Because then you can start mapping the different roles people play and where they maybe need help.
Right. Everyone always loves a quiz about themselves. Like, hello, I read Teen Magazine when I was a kid, and we were always taking quizzes that told us what type of X or what type of Y we were. There's something fun in receiving the result that tells you a little bit of something about yourself, and then create space for the conversation with your other family members about what's next.
Right. And if you hold 2 to 4 roles, like which most people do, then you can sort of look at them and that might spark interesting conversations like, do I want to hold this role? Is this role too much for me? Maybe this role is creating sources of strain and I can redesign it. So that's the goal with that. And I think it'll be really interesting.
One thing that you talk about within that is the concept of what good looks like for people. It's that definition of good that sometimes creates the hidden conflict within a family system where somebody's work is always redone, maybe because it's not up to the shared standards of what good looks like, but we don't talk about it and it just slips into somebody else's column without acknowledgement.
So I agree. And I would argue that what good looks like is different for every family. So there are some families that will want to be completely hands-on and do everything themselves. There are others that will involve paid caregivers or facilities. And then there are other families where because of complex issues like behavioral health problems or abuse may not do care. It may not be safe for them. So I think that's important to note, first of all. Good is sort of a slippery slope. I think that there's a lot of guilt and shame about caregiving, and we anchor on emotionality and love and loyalty. But I think if we could step back and realize that care is emotional and it's relational, but it's also a system. And so I think if you take the system lens, then it becomes a little bit more neutral and hopefully a little bit less fraught. And then you can maybe start having conversations that aren't so, challenging about what should happen, but instead architect what is best for your family. And that's
Right.
going to change over time, right?
So let's talk about timing, because you mentioned that this is something the family can start and might revisit it over time. What's the right timing to start the process?
That's a great question. So best care plan is a proactive care plan. I don't say
Mhm.
there's any judgment because as I shared with my story, we started reactively just like many people. But yeah, if you can get ahead of care needs, if you can start talking about care as a family, you can make better decisions. And just one example, Erin, is, sometimes we presume that people are always able to make decisions for themselves, and that's not true. If somebody has a stroke or a disabling accident, then they may not be able to speak for themselves and you may not know what they want. So if you can have those conversations and codify some decisions and build a system that's, structured but yet flexible, I think that really helps. I think everybody should have a care plan. Understanding what you want and getting around to it, I think, are important, right?
Right. And there's a natural advantage to thinking about our own care as early as possible, because while you are witnessing firsthand the care experience of your parent, you have stronger thoughts and feelings about it as we move into the next phase where our parents are no longer with us and care moves into the background. It might be harder to remember some of the things that we had strong reactions to at the time. So I'm trying to pay attention to what I'm noticing. I completely agree with you, though. We had the experience of being really lucky that my mom had toured several care facilities without an explicit plan to move my dad, because when he got put in the hospital and was then released from the hospital, she had to tell them where he was going. And there wasn't time at that moment to make an informed choice.
It was great that she toured the facilities, but as she knew, and you may know, if you're planning on using facilities like CCRCs, you often have to move in as an independent living resident, right? You can't jump immediately to like skilled nursing care. So that requires planning ahead too. I mean, I've chatted with folks at some facilities and it's usually a 1 to 3 year progression. So all of that rewards upfront planning, proactive moves before the care is even needed. If you're transitioning to an assisted living or memory care facility, there's more flexibility there.
That's a really good point. Getting out ahead of it. Let's talk a little bit about the care stability signals and the concept of the stability drift that you have worked on for. Okay.
So the idea, Erin, is to kind of create a shared view of risk where we're looking not just at what's happening with our loved ones, but also what's happening with our families. So quite often, caregivers will experience operational strain with kind of managing the caregiving system, and it drifts over time. So they're doing more or they're experiencing more strain and stress, but they're not really talking about it. And that can create an opportunity for care systems to stumble and maybe even fall. So that was the idea there. And so if we can identify that and create language around talking about risks in our home, then maybe we can identify different ways that the care system needs to evolve to meet this changing reality. What we design and hope for often doesn't hold long term. And that can be for a variety of reasons, from, changing health needs, but also can reflect a family's changing lived reality.
Yeah, I remember seeing a video from Adria of Be Like Care Consulting, where she described that you've got what the caregiver can give and you've got what the care recipient needs. And what the care recipient needs often gets higher over time. But what the caregiver can give is rarely tracking exactly with it. What the caregiver can give can dip suddenly. Like, I got an email from a friend yesterday who has Alzheimer's disease, and his wife just broke her leg and she's going to have to undergo a painful surgery. So this has gone like this for them, And so by talking about it and tracking it and recognizing it, it's almost like succession planning for a business, or scenario planning, where you kind of say, if this, then this, and let's see how we might be more covered and what our alternate plans might be should something break.
Yeah, I think that's really right. And I did an interview recently with Jeanette Galvanick, who talks about the mythical caregiver. And I've spoken with some other people either online or in person where we talk about this sort of fantasy caregiver. So let's kind of address that for a second. So the fantasy caregiver is someone who is available and willing and kind of could take, almost anything that life throws at them. Over time, families have shouldered more and more care responsibilities due to changes in social services and kind of a fraying of the safety net. But families haven't stayed stable, right, and static. They've changed too. So families are fragmented. That may mean there's fewer family caregivers to deliver care. And then the mythical caregiver, may be somebody who sort of has time and capacity. Well, that may not be true for single parents. It's definitely not true for people who are carrying multiple care recipients at one time. I've spoken recently with three women who had responsibility for three people either simultaneously or sequentially. And there's different cases like that. We could call them the edge, but maybe they're becoming the norm. As complex care involves more families, people are having to carry care for a longer period of time. And I think that really kind of reshapes how we should think about care in America today and globally, to be honest, too.
Right. There's this idea of a caregiver, but it's not a one-to-one relationship between a care recipient and a person providing care. For most people, there's a whole slew of supporting characters involved.
Sometimes the caregiver is simply not available. Like if they're having a health crisis of their own, they may not be available. And care capacity changes over time. Like we're experiencing in the life with my dad, and it's a very emotionally and mentally exhausting time. So our care capacity is at a low ebb when it actually needs to be higher. A lot of people experience that. Like if you are supporting somebody through a lengthy hospitalization or they have complex medical issues that you're managing in the home, this is very, very tiring and it's very difficult. And therefore your capacity is constantly changing and it may not rejuvenate at the time that you need it.
Right, exactly. Some care journeys are very long and very traumatic, and that caregivers to the capacity that they're drawing from declines over time, but not to mention the fact that they might physically age by 10 or 15 years during the course of care as well. So you've said that care is not a role, it's a system. And I think that's what you're speaking to right now. The framing is really important. How do you believe care changes when a family starts treating it that way?
I think when a family starts treating care as a system and really starts discussing it, there's a lot of intellectual honesty. So you don't talk about the way you hoped or wish care would be. You talk about what's really happening, right? And so then you have intelligent discussions about who's doing what and whether that's fair and equitable, about where you need to create additional capacity, in your family. And that might mean involving paid caregivers or facilities. And you kind of really look at how family decisions are made. And ideally that should be involving the wishes of, your entire family rather than just one person. When you take that approach, that really helps preserve relationships for the long term, both with your loved one and with your siblings, who you will be with for the rest of your life. So that's important.
Right. This reminds me of a conversation that I had early in my career. I'm a business owner, and there was something that needed to change. There was something that we weren't getting done. I had a member of my team who cared so much say, "You're right. It's not getting done. And if we need it to get done, we just need to get it done. We're just going to have to get it done." And when I heard her say that, I felt a visceral reaction that couldn't be our solution, that we had to change the system so that it was feasible for it to get done. And if we talk about it as a system rather than being our own personal failing, it moves that emotion off of it, like you described, which is really, really important. Intellectual honesty. I love that label for it.
Yeah, emotionality is tough. And I'll be honest, I've said and done emotional things. So it's not like we become, totally neutral with things. But I mean, emotionality can kind of trap us in our view of the present, right? And then we can't move forward proactively as a family. So when you can kind of take a step back and say, why am I reacting this way? What does this touch on? Is it touching on, these issues of love and loyalty or what I think should happen? Does it match reality? Does my view need to change or do I need to integrate other perspectives? And you can hopefully make better decisions.
Yeah, absolutely. So you and your sister have built what you now describe as a sustainable care system. What did that require? And what did you have to let go in order for that to happen?
Yeah, so I would say that our 9-year journey has strengthened rather than harmed our relationship, which I believe is somewhat unusual. As I talk to family caregivers, they often feel resentment if they are, taking on more of the care load. So I think what we started with was really kind of being aligned on what care looked like in our family. So we always knew that we would do care because our family's health issues. And we had a lot of love for our dad, and we had kind of shared values and a shared faith. So I would say, unlike some people, the care load has been very equitable. I have taken more of a lead, and I did that at the outside because my sister had taken on more responsibilities with our mom, and that felt fair to me. Like, it was definitely my turn, but I would say we've allocated, roles and responsibilities equitably. We've changed them sometimes over time when somebody was feeling strain. And we really have kind of a focus on fairness. So I could get into kind of more of the details if you're interested, but one highlight has been kind of communicating openly and honestly, being able to adapt over time, and then letting go of always being right. Some of the decisions we made have been because one person felt more strongly. And two of those involved assisted living. So when my dad had transitioned to assisted living in January of 2020, he was there for just a few weeks, and I pulled him out because I thought he's not going to thrive at all. Then in 2022, she transitioned him back to assisted living because she said that his care needs were outgrowing what we could provide in the family. And we were both right. That's just an example of letting somebody who feels more strongly kind of make a decision.
Caregiving is managing a system. Management and caregiving have a lot in common. And like management, there are roles, there are routines. Communication is really important, and there are always trade-offs when decisions are made. So this gets back to your care operating system. When you think about roles and routines and communication and trade-offs, which of those four tends to be most neglected?
I think communication is. I think as families, we have a lot of good intentionality. We often have great relationships, but we have a lot of taboos too. So it's very common, I think, for families not to discuss things that are actually very important. And that might be healthcare decisions. It might be what is going to prompt a transition. It might be finances. It might be end of life. And so what happens is that people are making decisions with incomplete visibility, incomplete information, and assumptions, that don't match what's happening. And then what happens is you get into reactive decisions and you're scrambling over time. So if you can have those conversations and you can communicate more openly and honestly, I think you're going to make, better care plans over time.
This is where your tool is so handy, because it can be hard to initiate a conversation with your family, period, but especially about a sensitive topic like finances. But for many families, if you're sitting down to do a worksheet together, and you're viewing that as a responsibility, a due diligence, a task that you're completing, that kind of opens up permission to talk about some of the topics that might normally be taboo. And so you empower families just by the existence of this tool in the center of the conversation.
Yeah, that's absolutely the goal. And I just would hope that families can approach care more neutrally, where it's not so fraught and it's not so scary. And if care systems evolve over time, then you could take a stab at it, and maybe your care plan needs to change. Maybe you make decisions that don't hold. But if you have kind of a proactive approach to gathering the family and talking about things, then I think you will get better outcomes over time.
And the first conversation makes the second conversation so much easier. Once the topics have been broached, re-raising them and coming back to revisit them is so much less intimidating than that first conversation was.
I was looking at your website. I think dementia is such an important topic. And families, they don't really understand when they start the dementia journey that it's going to be really tough, and it is, right?
Yeah.
And so kind of designing for that, whether it's decisions or solutions, to support that long arc of complex care is really, really important.
Yeah. It's a big challenge, and it relates so closely to aging and care. And it also, like, the same support that helps with Alzheimer's and dementia also helps in all these other situations, stroke, TBI, even mental health. It's just, there's so much space here and there's so much need, but it has to stay very focused in reality. And that's kind of where we come in, is just trying to infuse reality of what people experience into the design conversation. Okay. So you write about caregiving as a systems constraint shaping workforce, leadership, and sustainability. And I completely agree with that. What are organizations getting wrong when they try to address this, and what would getting it right look like?
I think companies have approached care is a benefits issue. And they've had some success with childcare and fertility and pregnancy care. But when it comes to elder care, it's fairly invisible at work. Employees are not likely to share this type of news at work. And one reason is they don't identify as caregivers. They rightly view that it might harm their job prospects. Being a caregiver might make you less likely to be promoted or be given great project opportunities. It might make your managers feel that maybe you're a higher risk, for productivity slippage or unexplained absences. And so that creates this culture of silence. But the problem is, if care is everywhere, then your leaders are doing care, your managers are doing care, and your employees are doing care. But, maybe as a senior leader, you don't know that. And all of a sudden, you've created a huge risk surface at work that's not really well understood and it's not well managed. I think the trick is to move from kind of a benefits to a holistic program approach. And what that looks like is going to differ based on your industry, your organization size, your workforce, and frankly, your budget for these type of resources. But some common principles would be to normalize care conversations. If senior leaders are talking about care and how they view it, then I think it makes it more acceptable for employees to share their stories as well. Training and empowering managers to have these conversations, and providing guardrails for what they can and can't offer, providing more holistic support at work. Work flexibility is probably one of the number one things that an organization can do to support their workers and to enable them to manage their responsibilities better. And then I think some visionary companies will find a way to redesign care structures. Like, I would love to see employers offer embedded senior care and child care at their facilities. They could offer, backup and respite care to help employees manage those responsibilities, or provide comprehensive resources to navigate care while at work.
Really well said, Holly. This is one thing that makes me grateful to be part of a small company. We don't always get it right, but I'm grateful for the flexibility that we can offer in these areas. But you're right. We explicitly acknowledge parenting, maternity, paternity, that sort of stuff. But we don't always talk about elder care. When we decided to really focus our attention on brain change, age tech, and care, when I went to my partnership team to talk about this focus area, everyone had their own personal connection and immediately connected with the cause. And I thought that's because we were really unique and this was meant to be. But come to find out, I started talking to other people in society and everyone connects to this. So a little bit less kismet internally at our business and actually more societal kismet. But I didn't know all of these people had gone through these, in some cases, super difficult caregiving journeys because, like you said, they weren't talking about it. It's going to be so important with the number of people 80 plus doubling before 2045, I think. We have a big surge on our hands and every employee is going to be affected by that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you assume that complex care is the norm and that your employees are likely sandwich generation caregivers managing childcare and care for one or more parents, then I think it forces some different decisions. So the Care.com recently did a report on employee benefits. It was really interesting. But one thing they said, which I thought was really great, which is they said that lifespan has increased without corresponding health span. So people are managing care for their loved ones who are increasingly fragile. That's something we're doing. Our dad is very fragile right now, and he has been for a while. So, what does that mean if you are an employer or a healthcare system? I mean, I think that changes things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And yeah, there's a lot to reflect on as we think about our own futures as well and how we can preserve that. Burning ourselves out in the middle of life certainly isn't the key. So actually, this kind of got to the next question, which is that there are a lot of tools and apps in the caregiving space. Where do you think technology is helping and where might it be solving the wrong problem?
So I'm really encouraged by the innovation in the space. I have had the opportunity to talk to a lot of founders, and I'm really excited by what they're doing. So I think people are coming to CareTech because of a personal experience. It could be in their own lives or in their families, and they see a gap and they want to solve it. Like, that is super heartening and super encouraging. One thing I think that is challenging is that there's just a ton of point solutions out there. So we're designing for a buyer who has capacity, and I think that CareTech actually has a bigger challenge ahead. So they're selling to people often at a point of crisis. They're selling to multiple buyers, right? So you may not be selling just to the care recipient, but you might be selling to an entire family, and their identity is shifting. So the care recipient is now grappling with the fact that they actually need care, whereas previously they were maybe fully independent. And then the family that's embracing care is, yeah, their identity is shifting as well. So I think that is a more complex issue to solve for.
You made several really good points in there. The opportunity for more integrated solutions in this space, the communications difficulty associated with targeting a customer who drops into this position overnight and may not really even know where they are and may not be in the same position 2 weeks from now, depending on what happens. So it's just really hard to find your audience and ensure that they're aware of what you're offering when you're offering it, unless you're plugged into them in some other way, unless it's all integrated, unless it's, offered to you by a larger guide of sorts that doesn't seem to exist. That is the key challenge for innovation in this space. But a lot of brands, struggle to garner the investment that they need to get off the ground in the early stages.
Yeah, I agree. So I don't have any easy answers. I think one thing to do is to move upstream. Like A Place for Mom is doing that, which is really interesting. They're targeting millennials and they're going to try to move earlier into care decision making. I think that is really good. And then I think you have to meet people where they're at. If your buyer doesn't want to be a buyer because they don't identify with needing care tech, or your caregiver is so stressed they can't think straight, then that presents some different issues. I don't have the easy solution to all of that, but I think making value clear, moving upstream, and integrating solutions so that your family doesn't have to integrate the 18 different solutions is probably the way to go. A possible comparison might be like financial planning. When people transitioned from pensions to 401ks, there was obviously an imperfect switch because not everybody made the journey. But there've been, whether it's earlier financial education, whether it's dashboards that digitize your future earnings and what you need for different scenarios. I think that something like that, creating more of a digital journey, helping people with navigation and integration, and helping them visualize care as a system rather than something that happens at some unknown point in time is probably the way to go.
Yeah. You're speaking a little bit about visibility in that with the dashboard. You've said that visibility changes choices. So from a design perspective, what does it mean to make the care system visible for a family that has been operating perhaps in the dark?
I think when you're operating a care system, you don't realize that you take a step back, say, what's happening here? Because families are smart and they realize that things are breaking, even if they are reluctant to talk about it. So taking a step back, understand that you're not helping out. This is not a series of tasks. This might be an ongoing journey for your family. And it might get more challenging over time if your loved one is fragile and has changing care needs. When you can see something, you can work to understand it and then you can design it. So I would say build a care plan that has some structure to it, but is also flexible enough to kind of change over time is important.
There's a parallel to that in so many things that we do in user experience design and in software design. But very recently, now that we've got all of these AI and automation tools that are becoming available to make us so much faster at work, the idea is to automate the processes and workflows that we use. And the process of automating those workflows requires a type of thinking where you really get explicit about, well, what are all the steps and decisions that go into doing a task that you might view as simple? Like, for example, I was trying to decide earlier today whether something should be posted as text or posted as a video, right? Making a simple social media post. Well, there's a whole decision-making framework that guides which of those solutions is best. And I've never explicitly thought about that. It requires us to think about the specific steps that go in to a system in order to improve upon them. And that's kind of what you're saying. Map it out. Look at what's actually happening here, give names to steps, describe how the decisions are made or how they will be made.
Yeah, if you do that, then you can align roles and responsibilities where people actually want to help out, right? Rather than kind of enforcing them. You can make them more equitable. You can see the risks and surface where they're emerging. And then you can improve over time. So one part of the care operating system has Care Kaizen, where you can identify something that needs to change and you can make incremental improvements over time.
I love it. So our podcast is focused on designing better experiences for people navigating aging, brain change, and care. Where do you think that the design community is most absent in this space?
Understanding how people think about care and make decisions is really important. So if you're designing a solution, but that doesn't include the decision-making process, then you might face adoption challenges. Understanding that you're designing for multiple stakeholders whose identity and priorities are shifting over time is pretty essential as well. And how people perceive solutions. There was a study that said that caregivers who are most stressed are least likely to adopt solutions. So that's a population that actually would probably need CareTech or care services, and yet they're unwilling to adopt that. Understanding that and how you can reduce caregiver stress is pretty important. And then considering that complex care is here to stay. It's not an edge case. It's not affecting a small group of people. It's probably going to impact a large portion of the population.
Accounting for that in the design of a product and the way that you go to market with it is really important. You use the phrase that design is how families reclaim agency. What does agency really look like for a family caregiver, and what are the signs that someone has it versus that they've lost it?
Agency is really important. And sometimes people get caught up in systems and they realize, I don't really have a lot of authority and my voice is not heard. That can create friction and unhappiness over time. So it starts with naming what's happening. Goes back to our intellectual honesty piece, right? Sometimes families spend a lot of time dancing around reality because it's stressful to name the truth and it might create conflict. But if you can't speak what's happening, then you don't really have an opportunity to kind of change it. Understanding that you're operating a family's care system is critical and that everybody's opinion matters. I've spoken with caregivers and they say, in our family, we don't do this, or so-and-so can't handle healthcare because they don't like the sights and smells of care. So you can't force people to do things they don't want to, or if you do, it's very short-lived. Understanding that people can contribute in different ways is critical, and then kind of sharing roles and expectations and trade-offs. It may be that what you hope for isn't realistic, but you can probably get halfway with some different trade-offs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a client who was a super savvy business person years ago, and he told me that when it comes to performance reviews, he doesn't worry about any of his employees' weaknesses. He just focuses on their strengths because the business wants to use their strengths. And I think that what you're saying is that can be a consideration for a family system as well. Square peg, round hole, I think, is the analogy where, you might be able to optimize your family's coverage for care if you make sure that you talk about what each person is best suited to handle at a given time.
I agree. And that's why I created the care archetypes, which is all these different roles that we play.
Right.
So the architect is, somebody who designs the system. The stabilizer kind of helps fix things when they're going wrong. And the anchor might be the person who kind of is responsible for the emotional health of the family. All of this is important. And we should understand that the contributions different people play. It's not always like who completes the most care tasks. It might be more complex than that. And, people do important work for families. In our own family, my sister has been very much the anchor. Like she creates these lovely family experiences and meals that we all enjoy. I've been more of the COO of the family in terms of getting things done. But all of these things are important.
So 9 years into this care journey, what do you now know that you wish you'd known at the beginning?
So, Erin, it really is a journey. A lot of us, myself included, had unrealistic expectations. I thought I'll make a couple decisions and then care will be set. And that was obviously upended with the trip to Italy that went awry and the 2 years of medical chaos that ensued. But I think it's important to know that complex care is a long arc, that it can be very tiring, and figuring out how you can use your family resources to plan for that long arc of care. Because trying to do it all yourself is very challenging. And some people do that and they may not have other options. But when you can kind of share the loads and conserve some emotional and physical capacity for later stages of care, I think that can be very helpful.
Stability is temporary, and we need to constantly think about the fact that this could be a long journey and not burn ourselves out too early on. But if you look forward, what does the caregiving support landscape need to look like in 10 years or 15 years that it doesn't look like today?
Well, I think we need to shift off the idea that families do everything, right? So that's first. So ideally in 10 years, a lot has changed. So, we have better social services and employers have stepped up more and there's like lots of innovation in this space. Families have more options and more resources. I would hope that they have better opportunities to navigate, coordinate, and integrate care, and they can share that with their partners. In addition to that, today, if you go through care transitions, they're very stressful, and it often kind of creates a opportunity where care can collapse either for a moment or force a redesign of what you're doing. And I would hope that with clinical transitions and other types of transitions, families don't have to rebuild every time, that they have the systems hold a continuity across these experiences, reducing the strain on them. Today, we have fragmented information. Like, it's great with hospitals and healthcare systems. We all enjoy EHRs and online portals, but I would hope there's more digitization of that experience where the information travels across providers and institutions and experiences so that families are not stitching everything together, and so that everyone who's participating in that care can have that same visibility and that kind of holistic view of the care recipient. And it should be easier to integrate new providers as well. So those are my hopes for how the caregiving support landscape will change. And I think that if that happened, then families would be able to make fewer decisions. They would make more of them upstream of the crisis, create less stress and strain for them overall. If there's more competition in the space, that will just be better for everyone. There will be better solutions for families and better prices, hopefully, when it comes to caregiving services, because care is very expensive today. More options, I think, equals a less stressful experience and hopefully more opportunities for families to get the help they need.
Right. I love the picture that response painted. And I think about the opportunity for technology to help extend the limited caregiving supply that we have, in our country. But integration sits at the center of that, where the systems have to talk to one another. And the last thing anyone needs is another login, although the logins do need to work for everybody involved in the care system, which is a whole nother part of the issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you talk about care supply, that's a really important issue. We're already experiencing that, and that will only grow across all levels. We could make, care training more available and free so that more people can participate, and we could tap different labor pools, whether it's college students, retirees, or people who are out of work or in transition. How great would it be to offer something that's more of like an Uber type format where you can get trained, you can take on shifts more easily and kind of fill the gap that you want to do to work, and make talent and supply more available to people.
So that kind of gets into what you're maybe most excited about right now. I'm curious about in your own work or in the broader care space, what's really got you excited?
What I'm really excited about is this opportunity to build a care system framework that supports families and helps them make better decisions. I think that there's a lot of opportunity to create a visual language and create structure around things that we do quietly behind the scenes, and hopefully support families as they're navigating some of the most complex decisions and changes in their lives.
I love that vision. I hope that we're able to pull that off. Curious, you've got a lot of expertise, Holly. It comes through very clearly in this conversation. Who are you looking to connect with right now, and where can people find you and your work?
I'm looking to connect with quite a lot of people, families themselves, like caregivers, leaders who want to talk about care, and then organizations that are looking to redesign it. I'm writing 5 times a week as your chief care officer, and I love to engage with people through interviews and comments and calls. So I would encourage people to kind of find me there.
Love the visibility that you're creating for these important topics and the language that you're creating for families. Holly, thank you so much for this conversation. You have shown a light on so many important points within CareTech, including the systems nature of the situation, that this is not just about individuals, but it's about the way we all work together and the roles that we take on, the challenges to getting into the customers' lives in order to actually help them, and the opportunities we have to solve a lot of really important needs in the future. So I could just talk to you all day, but I'm grateful for the time that you've offered.
Erin, it's been so great to connect with you. And I just love this idea of designing decisions. And I love the work that you're doing with dementia and brain health. I think it's really, really important and will only grow in significance over time.
I agree. And I hope that we're able to make a meaningful difference. But I think with advisors like you paying attention to the realities of what care is truly like, product leaders can approach the opportunity from an informed standpoint that solves real problems for real people in real life. And for our listeners, Slide UX is a user experience design firm focused on brain change, age tech, and care. And if you subscribe to our newsletter at slideux.com/newsletter, you won't miss the next episode. But for now, I want to conclude with a final thank you. Holly, it's been great.
Erin, thanks so much. I really enjoyed our conversation today.